Welcome to Fort Oglethorpe Television. I'm Council Lady Paula Stinnett, and I want to share with you a wonderful opportunity that I received December of 2016 when I was contacted by Dale Higdon, who is a council member of the Georgia Piedmont Land Trust, also a retired forester. He brought with him Carol Hassell, the executive director of the Piedmont Land Trust, and along with them, Rebecca Spitler, who is the mayor pro tem of the city of Berkeley Lake and the president of the Georgia Piedmont Land Trust. Together, the four of us walked these tracts that were purchased initially by the Civil War Trust. All of these areas are historic, valuable areas where battles did take place. They are contiguous to the Fort Oglethorpe area and to Chickamauga Battlefield Park. One day, they will become part of the park when Chickamauga Battlefield Park is ready to accept these land tracts. Join me now as Dale and Carol and Rebecca tell about these wonderful assets to the city of Fort Oglethorpe.
Okay, I'm Dale Higdon. I am on the board of the Georgia Piedmont Land Trust, and I am a forester. I'm retired from the Georgia Forestry Commission. I've been on our board now for 18 years. The Georgia Piedmont Land Trust is a conservation organization that protects lands permanently. I provide primarily services to inspect our properties and to make sure they're being protected, the natural resources are being protected. The particular piece of property we're on today is in Catoosa County. It is this particular tract is called the Holland Tract, and there are two other tracts adjacent to it. These were purchased by the Civil War Trust, which is a private organization that is attempting to preserve as many Civil War sites across the country as possible to make sure they're not developed. That is a problem in a lot of areas where urban building has encroached on the Civil War properties. This particular tract is primarily a field. It was used for cutting hay, and it still is, for that matter. It's being maintained. But there is some natural hardwood in the area. It is bordered by West Chickamauga Creek. One of the things that is most important in protecting these properties is, of course, wildlife habitat, soil and water conservation, particularly water quality. And it is really beneficial to preserve these properties in perpetuity, both for the natural resources and, in this case, for the historical perspective, because there was a lot of Civil War activity in this area. And hopefully the idea is that one day, if and when the federal government could afford to buy it, it will be incorporated into the Chickamauga National Battlefield, which the main battlefield is less than half a mile from this particular location. The reason that we do these monitoring inspections on an annual schedule is to make sure, number one, that the properties are being protected, because we are located in the Atlanta area, particularly on a piece of property like this. We do depend on volunteers to help us look after the properties, but in a lot of cases, if we need to inspect them just to make sure that, well, people have not done illegal tree cutting or trash dumping, which we've had occur on some of our other properties. And of course, we are an accredited land trust, and one of the requirements for accreditation is that you do annual monitoring. Now, we've been doing that anyway over the years when we first started the land trust. So it's important to make sure that the properties are being maintained, are being protected, and particularly since most of the properties, nobody lives on them, or there's nobody in the immediate area. So that's the reason that we do these, to just make sure they are being protected, and that there's no violations of the conservation easement. Generally, that's not a problem. But probably one of the more common things that could happen is people, particularly if there are houses adjacent to our properties, they encroach, they sort of extend their yard out into our properties. They are on the conservation easements. They maybe do illegal tree cutting. So those are things that we're concerned about, and that's why we check them on a routine schedule. Okay, we're looking at a mature hardwood forest which comprises a very small part of this property, maybe 5 acres out of, say, 107. It's mostly white oak, red oak, hickory, some American beech, and generally trees of this type have been around for at least 50, maybe as many as 75 years, because it takes longer for them to grow. You have a lot of benefits, of course, not just from the fact that they produce acorns for wildlife, but having it on the edge of a field, wildlife need to have what's called the edge effect. It provides shelter and protection from predators and also from the elements, wind and rain. So this is one of the biggest areas of forest land on this tract. You will notice in the foreground the greenery coming up next to it, which is Chinese privet. Chinese privet is an invasive species. It was introduced, I don't know how many years ago, probably close to 100 years ago. It is not a good species because it propagates very quickly and it will take over the understory. It will block out sunlight to lower vegetation, and it spreads very quickly. It does produce a berry that birds will eat, but it doesn't have any redeeming features otherwise. So it's advisable to try to keep that cut out, which is hard to do, but eventually, if it's not controlled, it will take over the understory of the forest.
I'm Carol Hassell, and I'm the Executive Director of the Georgia Piedmont Land Trust. The organization was founded back in 1998, and I was one of the founders of it. Today we have close to 2,000 acres under permanent protection. And one of those situations is this property that we're on today. It is covered by a conservation easement, which our organization holds. Let me explain a little bit about what a conservation easement is. It is a legal contract that is voluntarily placed upon a piece of land by the landowner, and it is because that landowner wants to preserve certain features or aspects of the property. Generally, they are conservation, natural resource kinds of features, but sometimes they're historical and archaeological. In the particular case of this tract, which used to be owned by the Holland family but was subsequently acquired, and I'll talk about that in a minute, this particular piece of property is being protected both because it helps to protect water quality along West Chickamauga Creek. It has some very interesting native plants on it and mature trees, and because it is right in the middle of a portion of the battlefield of Chickamauga. The Holland family sold the property to the Civil War Trust, which is a national nonprofit organization whose entire purpose is to save endangered battlefields. They placed a conservation easement on it in our favor, in other words, donating it to us, so that we could ensure that the land remains protected forever to protect the archaeological features and the natural features. Some of the sale price that was involved for this property came from a federal government grant from a program called the American Battlefield Protection Program, which is specifically designed to protect threatened battlefields. So there will be another couple of properties that we will be visiting later on today. The Civil War Trust has acquired 3 of them actually. This is one, and on the other side of West Chickamauga Creek are 2 other pieces of property that the trust acquired. In all 3 cases, they have placed a conservation easement on the property to make sure that the natural values of the property are protected and to make sure that the archaeological features are protected. So let me turn to one of the natural features of this particular piece of property. Dale told you a moment ago about the negative aspects of Chinese privet and how dangerous how detrimental it has been to much area, both natural areas and people's backyards for that matter. Here's an example of a good plant. This is our native cane, and it is a cane that grew historically along creek sides. West Chickamauga Creek is right in back of us, and it helped to stabilize the stream banks. It also provided habitat for wildlife and came to be known as as a plant that would protect stream sides. About 3 or 4 years ago, we noticed that there was a small patch of cane growing a little bit in that direction, and it has continued to increase so that, as you can see today, it's expanded into quite a substantial stand along West Chickamauga Creek, and we're thrilled with that. So now we're on a tract that was acquired from the Nance family. This was very, very recently acquired, and it too contributes to preservation of archaeological features from the Battle of Chickamauga. It is also adjacent to a tract just to the north of here that is called the Powell Tract. It was also acquired by the Civil War Trust initially, and the Georgia Piedmont Land Trust holds conservation easements now on both this tract and the tract immediately adjacent, as well as the one on the other side of West Chickamauga Creek, which is where we were in the initial video. So these tracts protect the stream on both sides. They do provide some access for kayakers and boaters close to Reeds Bridge Road, but the primary function of our conservation easement is to ensure that the archaeological features that are so important in telling the story of the Battle of Chickamauga are protected forever.
The mission of the Georgia Piedmont Land Trust is to ensure that green and open space in northern Georgia provide the ecological benefits essential for healthy communities and a high quality of life for their citizens by permanently preserving land in the northern regions of Georgia to protect the quality of our waters and woodlands, complementing the conservation efforts of cities and citizens, and saving farmland and historic sites for communities to enjoy now and for generations to come. Georgia Piedmont Land Trust partners with private landowners, municipalities and counties, nonprofit organizations. If you are interested in knowing more about the Georgia Piedmont Land Trust, please look them up at www.gplt.org. I hope you enjoyed meeting Dale and Carol. Rebecca was a little shy this time, but we'll get her next time. The Piedmont region is Georgia's second largest region. This area is huge and home to so many valuable historic areas, conservation areas, and environments that are protected by land trust. I hope you enjoyed this segment and learned something about the valuable, beautiful, aesthetic area in which you live. I'm Council Lady Paula Stinnett. God bless America, and as always, it's a great day to be in Fort Oglethorpe.